June 14, 1997, 9:40 p.m., Albuquerque, New Mexico. 6 adult performers left a community arena after a spring showcase and vanished between the loading bay and the parking lot. The oldest was 22. The youngest was 20. What happened to Avery and Autumn Porter, and to their 4 teammates, in that 30-minute window? 20 years later, on July 12, 2017, at 8:17 a.m., a phone call to the Porters claimed a buried clue had surfaced in the desert. It promised a door back into a sealed case. Someone had moved in the dark. Who moved first? Elaine Porter had memorized the case number. APD 97 Res 4216. She kept it on a card near the stove. At 8:17 a.m., Detective Nate Hollis called her cell. He asked if Mark was home. He asked if she could speak privately. His voice was flat but urgent. He said there was field activity in Socorro County. He said a civilian had found something that might belong to the missing 6. He would not describe the item by phone. He asked them to come to the Socorro County substation by 10. Mark set down his coffee. Elaine wrote the time, caller, and location on a legal pad. She repeated each detail aloud. Then she read the list again, slower. They drove south on I-25. No music. No talk. The desert rolled past in hard light. The substation smelled like dust and bleach. 2 other couples waited in plastic chairs. Cara Stanton's parents were on the left. Hannah Lee's father stood by the vending machine. Their faces registered the same quiet calculation. Distance. Time. Now a call. Hollis walked them into a briefing room and closed the door. A clock ticked above a dry erase board. He set his phone on the table and pressed record. July 12, 2017, 10:06 a.m., Socorro County Sheriff Substation, he said. He identified himself, his badge number, and the case number. He listed the 6 missing adults by name, age, and last known location. Avery Porter, 20, performer. Autumn Porter, 20, performer. Cara Stanton, 21. Hannah Lee, 20. Rachel Cole, 22. Lila Ramirez, 21. They had left the West Mesa Community Arena between 9:35 and 10:05 p.m. on June 14, 1997. 2 cars remained in the lot. Keys and purses were gone. Cameras at the time were analog and low resolution. Hollis turned a laptop around. A single image filled the screen. Granite, sand, and the edge of a flat stone. Under it, fabric and something like nylon webbing. The color was hard to read through dust. He said the finder was a day hiker named Caleb Morton. Age 43. Local address on Canyon Street, Socorro. He had his dog with him and a GPS track. He called at 7:11 a.m. from a ridge above a dry arroyo. Elaine gripped the back of her chair. Mark leaned forward and studied the ruler in the frame. The scene team had placed it beside stitching on the webbing. Hollis explained chain of custody. He did not comment on the object itself. He would not say whose it might be. The lab had not yet opened the sealed bag. The search area was marked off with tape. He answered their questions with low, clear sentences. The site lay in the Jornada del Muerto Basin, roughly 53 miles south-southeast of Albuquerque, east of I-25. The image had been shot at 9:12 a.m. The team expected to remain on scene until sundown. He invited the families to view the perimeter from a safe distance if they wished. He warned them not to cross the tape. Elaine nodded. Short motions. Precise breathing. She asked to see the coordinates. Hollis read them from a notepad and gave her a printed copy. He asked if Avery or Autumn had owned duffel bags or team gear with unique markings. Elaine said yes. Avery had sewn a small loop into her strap for a sweat towel. Autumn had worn an elastic band around the zipper pull. Both women labeled clothing with laundry pens. They had shared a locker bin. The bin went missing the week after the showcase. Hannah's father asked about leads in 1997 that pointed south. Hollis said nothing substantial had connected the case to Socorro County by name. There had been vendor deliveries and rental vans logged near the arena. Records were incomplete. Several companies had changed names in the late 1990s. He underlined the same point twice. Today's find could be related or staged. They had to test, date, and match fibers and inks before any conclusion. They formed a small convoy at 10:41 a.m. Hollis drove ahead in an unmarked SUV. The families followed at posted speeds. Patrol units held at key intersections to clear turns. Elaine watched the odometer rise and the city fall away. The basin widened into heat and sky. Nothing closed the gap between then and now like miles of open road. They turned off near a rusted cattle gate. A deputy waved them to a hard-packed pullout. Crime scene tape glowed against low scrub. 2 white tents stood in crosswind. Techs moved with measured, slow motions. A camera flashed at regular intervals. The air smelled like metal and dry grass. Hollis kept them 20 yards from the torp. At 11:18 a.m., a man with sunburned forearms approached with a leash in hand. He introduced himself as Caleb Morton. His dog, Scout, sat and watched the tents. Morton described the hike and the moment Scout started pouring at the flat stone. He did not guess. He did not claim. He only traced boot prints in the sand with a finger and offered the GPS track on his phone. Hollis took his statement and logged the phone's file hash. Elaine tried to read the ground. A half-arc of disturbed soil curved away from the stone. A tech measured each mark and spoke the numbers into a recorder. 23 inches. 27 inches. 41 inches. Elaine wrote them down in her small notebook. Mark watched the horizon and the dust trails far to the west. He checked his watch. He checked Elaine's face. He said nothing. Hollis stepped back from the tent and met the families at the tape. He kept his hands away from his pockets. He spoke evenly. The lab would need hours, not minutes. He asked them to find shade. He suggested water and food at a diner in San Antonio, 5 miles south. Elaine said she was staying. Mark said he would bring ice and sandwiches. Hollis nodded and pointed to a thin ribbon of cloud building over the basin. By noon the heat had tightened. Voices dropped. Radios clicked. Scout whined once and lay down. A gust lifted the edge of a torp, then settled. The stone did not move. The ground held its line. Something else finally moved instead. What, exactly, broke the stalemate? They formed up again at 12:06 p.m., July 12, 2017. The heat drove everyone under the tape's shadow. Detective Nate Hollis briefed the families in short, even lines. The Jornada site sat on Bureau of Land Management ground, east of I-25, 3 miles off a dirt spur. Wind ran steady from the south. Visibility was good. He pointed to a tent wall where a scene photo was clipped. A flat stone. Packed sand. A corner of nylon and a strap stitched with bar tacks. The finder stood 10 feet away, waiting for his turn. He introduced himself as Caleb Morton, age 43, resident Socorro. He held a leash. His dog, Scout, lay beside his boots and watched the tent opening. Morton reported his exact timeline. He left his truck at 6:18 a.m. He walked north-northeast along a cattle path. At 7:03 a.m., Scout alerted at a flat, heat-smoothed rock. Morton tested the edge and saw the sand shift. He marked the spot with a trekking pole and called 911 at 7:11 a.m. He stayed until deputies arrived at 8:02 a.m. He recorded his GPS track and handed Hollis the file. Hollis logged the file hash and read back coordinates. He stated the chain of custody. A crime scene tech lifted the stone at 9:06 a.m. He photographed the first exposure at 9:12 a.m. A second tech measured and sketched. The visible item was a duffel corner and a length of nylon webbing. Color could not be confirmed due to dust. The exposed section was bagged to prevent contamination by windblown grit. The rest remained in situ. At 12:19 p.m., a senior tech stepped from the tent and gave an initial assessment. The strap and stitching looked late 1990s manufacture. The corrosion on the zipper slider suggested burial and later re-exposure. Sand inside the zipper teeth was fresh and dry. The surrounding crust was thin. That implied shallow depth and recent disturbance. He would not date it by eye. He would not say more before the lab opened it. Families were asked to stand back another 5 feet. Elaine Porter listened without interrupting. She wrote times, names, and actions in a small notebook. She asked one question. Could a duffel like that have been placed here recently to throw the case off? The tech answered in a single sentence. Yes, which is why we test fibers, dust composition, and transfer. Elaine nodded and capped her pen. Mark Porter photographed the tape line and the wind flag for reference. Hollis turned to the families and outlined next steps. The duffel would be opened under controlled conditions at the substation. Video would run. A property clerk would count items and assign barcodes. If personal property appeared, photos would be shown to the families only after cataloging. No media would attend the opening. He paused, checked the time, and asked if anyone needed water. A deputy moved coolers down the line. At 12:41 p.m., Morton approached Hollis again and asked to return to his truck. Hollis cleared him after a last question set. Had he seen other footprints near the stone before deputies arrived? Morton said yes. He had seen 2 boot patterns crossing from south to north within the past day. He had photographed them when the sun was low. He offered the images. Hollis accepted the phone, mirrored the files, and logged the time. The senior tech called out for Hollis at 12:53 p.m. The tent flap opened. He held a clear sleeve with a small fabric panel. The panel carried printed lettering. The letters were partly abraded. Enough remained to read a segment, COYEELT. Hollis did not assign meaning at the tape. He spoke carefully. The lab will evaluate font, dye, and wear. He returned the sleeve to the tech and told him to proceed per protocol. Elaine stepped back and steadied her notes. Coyote Elite had been the club team in 1997. Their warm-ups were red and black. Their sponsor then had been Car Training and Conditioning, known as CCT. The families had boxes of flyers with those names. She did not say it out loud. She wrote the letters, the time, and circled them. A patrol unit idled by the pullout. 2 reporters arrived and were kept at distance. Hollis walked to them, explained the perimeter, and declined comment. He returned to the families and set expectations. Hours, not minutes. He suggested the diner in San Antonio for a short break. He gave each family his direct line. Elaine declined. Mark said he would bring coffee and ice. Hollis agreed. He asked them to stay within view of the pullout. At 1:22 p.m., wind gusts lifted grit across the site. A tech set sandbags at 2 corners. A fresh photograph marker went down. The zipper slider came free with a dry click. The tent zipped shut. Elaine closed her eyes and counted breaths to 30. Mark touched her elbow. He said the least helpful thing and the most human one. "We are here." On the drive for coffee, Mark kept to the speed limit. Elaine watched the shoulder for tire crumbs and recent tracks. The road into San Antonio carried little traffic. The diner's neon sign buzzed at 1:41 p.m. The waitress poured coffee before they Saturday. Her name tag read Maria. She asked if they were with the search. Mark said yes. She nodded once and set down a menu. Elaine stared at Maria's earrings. Simple studs. No pattern she knew. Her hand relaxed. They ate quickly and carried 2 coffees back to the car. As they turned out, a blue pickup rolled by toward the north spur. The rear window held a circular decal. White on dark glass. The letters were stylized and curved. Elaine raised her phone and took a shot through heat shimmer. The image blurred. The truck was already past the turn. The decal's edge caught the light and looked like a crescent. Hollis called as they re-entered the pullout at 2:07 p.m. The duffel had been opened. 3 items were inside. A warm-up jacket panel with partial text. An elastic band with black marker residue. A cloth wrist wrap printed with CCT. No wallets. No IDs. No bone or tissue. He would hold the items for lab processing and then show photos. Elaine said they understood. Her voice stayed level. She looked past the tape at the low ridge beyond the tents. A dust plume rose there, thin and fast, then cut away toward a shallow arroyo. Someone else was already reading the ground. Who was steering that second trail? At 2:19 p.m., July 12, 2017, Elaine and Mark parked on the pullout's far edge. Heat shimmered above the basin. Hollis waved them to stay put while the tent stayed sealed. Elaine tracked movement along the low ridge with her eyes. A thin dust line cut west, then paused near a shallow saddle. She noted the time and direction. Mark followed her gaze but said nothing. A blue pickup appeared from the saddle at 2:27 p.m. It crept along the Jeep trail and eased past the pullout. Its rear window held a round decal. White lines curved around 3 letters. The outer ring looked like a crescent. Elaine raised her phone and shot 2 frames through the windshield. Both blurred. The driver never looked over. The passenger wore a tan ball cap and kept his head low. Hollis walked to their bumper as the truck faded toward the highway. He wrote the plate, then crossed it out. No plate was mounted. He asked what they saw. Elaine described the decal's curve and letters. She said the outer arc suggested a moon. She said it resembled the CCT brand mark from the late 1990s. Hollis kept his face flat. He asked about the passenger's clothing, boots, and any visible gear. Mark listed a tan cap, a grey tee, and dark jeans. No tools seen. No stickers besides the rear window. At 2:41 p.m., a deputy called Hollis to the tent. He excused himself and jogged back. Elaine checked the 2 photos again. The glare washed out detail. She pinched and zoomed on the second frame. A curved tail on the middle letter came into view. Not a T. More like a stylized P. She wrote C.P. with a question mark and underlined it twice. A radio squawked at 2:52 p.m. The tent opened. Evidence sleeves came out in gloved hands. Hollis returned with 3 stills on a tablet. A warm-up panel with partial text. A cloth wrist wrap that read CCT. An elastic band with black marker bleed. He said nothing beyond labels and times. Elaine studied the fonts and stitching. She noted the slanted serif on the C. She wrote Club Gear consistent in her notebook and dated it. They left the perimeter at 3:06 p.m. Hollis organized a small team to scan the Jeep trail where the pickup had appeared. He asked the porters to wait at the pullout and to answer if he called. Elaine agreed. Mark watched the ridge again. A faint echo of engine noise carried from the west. It faded, then returned from the south. By 3:32 p.m., patrol reported a tire track split near a low arroyo. 2 sets of shallow lugs peeled off the main line and circled back. Hollis asked the team to photograph impressions and cast a clean print if possible. He called the porters to update them, then ended the call and stepped beneath the tent again. A minute later, he re-emerged with a smaller sleeve. Inside lay a thin loop of metal with matte tarnish. He did not show it to the families. He carried it to his SUV and placed it in a cooler with sealed inserts. At 3:47 p.m., Elaine decided to walk the marked path to the south side of the pullout. She kept behind the tape. Mark walked beside her. Thin dust lifted with each step. Near a clump of broomweed, something flashed. Mark stopped and crouched. A shard of clear plastic lay pressed into sand. It had adhesive on one side and a torn edge on the other. A tech measured it and bagged it. Elaine wrote the time and possible decal fragment. Hollis returned at 4:03 p.m. He asked them to join him at the SUV. He showed them a printed still from the tablet, scaled and sharpened. The warm-up panel's lettering matched the club's archived flyer from 1997. He held up the flyer for comparison. He did not ask for confirmation. He said the lab would handle it. Elaine nodded and kept her voice even. She said the panel's font weight matched the flyer's header, not the jacket's back. She wrote that down, too. A mile south, the road into San Antonio threw up another dust ribbon. The blue pickup reappeared, now heading toward town. Its rear glass flashed again. Elaine took a third photo from the edge of the pullout. Hollis signaled a unit on the highway and gave a brief description. Blue pickup, no plate, 2 male occupants, rear window circular decal, possible letters CP something. He ended the call and watched the heat cut the image in two. At 4:21 p.m., Mark pointed to a dark patch near the saddle. Footprints. A deputy followed and flagged the prints. Heel-to-toe length measured at approximately 12 inches. Another print measured 10.5. Both were recent. No rain had fallen in days. The stride split at a rock outcrop and rejoined at the Jeep trail. The smaller set showed toe drag on 2 steps, like someone pulling weight. They broke for water. Elaine stood apart and reviewed her notes. 2 sightings of the pickup within an hour. No plate. Decal with curved letters. Possible adhesive shard near the pullout. Tracks that left and returned. None of it proved identity. All of it pointed one way. CCT had sold assets in the late 1990s to a man named Mason Red. Red ran a renamed complex near Los Lunas. He had passed invoices with bulk catering orders to ranch properties south of San Antonio. Hollis said they would seek warrants for records and camera footage on that corridor. Elaine looked west and thought about the decal's crescent edge. A moon shape tied to letters that should not be together. She closed the notebook and met Mark's eyes. If the logo belonged to a known network, the next stop was not the tent. It was a gate with cameras. And a door that opened down instead of in. On July 13, 2017, at 8:10 a.m., Detective Nate Hollis met with the district judge in Socorro. He presented an affidavit for a limited search of Lawford Ranch, south of San Antonio, New Mexico. The scope covered the outer grounds, the horse barn, utility rooms, and any substructures beneath animal stalls. The affidavit cited the decal fragment, 2 sightings of a blue pickup without plates, and historic catering invoices tied to the property. The judge signed a time-bound warrant at 8:34 a.m. Service was authorized between 9:30 a.m. and 4:30 p.m. Hollis assembled entry personnel at 9:05 a.m. 2 deputies covered the gate. A crime scene team waited at the turnout with sealed kits. An electrical technician from the county stood by for safety. Elaine and Mark Porter were asked to remain at the diner and keep phones on. At 9:42 a.m., unit staged a quarter-mile west of the main entrance. At 9:51 a.m., the warrant clock started. The gate camera tracked the convoy and held steady. Grant Lawford met them in the driveway. He wore a pressed shirt and a ranch cap. He was calm and guarded. Hollis read the warrant and handed him a copy. Lawford declined consent beyond the warrant scope. He said the barn was private and under renovation. Hollis repeated the limits and the end time. A deputy photographed the gate, the keypad box, and the camera pole. Timestamps were logged from body-worn video. They moved past the house at 10:07 a.m. The barn sat 200 yards north, long and clean with fresh paint. Fixed cameras covered the corners. The interior smelled of hay and disinfectant. Stalls were swept. Feed bins were stacked along the east wall. Hollis split the team. 2 techs checked wall outlets and breaker boxes. 1 deputy followed wiring runs with a tracer wand. The wand chirped near the rear storage closet. At 10:23 a.m., a tech lifted a plywood panel behind the closet shelving. A steel plate lay beneath, level with the floor. Its seams were tight and painted to match. The tracer wand sounded again near the right edge. The county electrician cut power to the nearest circuit. A second tech found a flush keypad under a lip of wood. It showed no lights. A handheld battery pack applied power through test leads. The keypad blinked, then demanded a code. Hollis asked Lawford to stand within view and not interfere. Lawford said he did not know the code. He asked to call his attorney. Hollis allowed the call from the driveway with a deputy present. Inside the barn, a tech raised a fiber optic scope through a small gap. Metal gave way to a shaft and stair treads. The scope showed concrete below and fluorescent glare from an emergency strip. Hollis called the judge to extend the warrant to the substructure. The judge approved at 10:47 a.m., noting probable cause from concealed access. At 10:55 a.m., the keypad accepted a default manufacturer sequence and chirped. The steel plate unlocked with a dull click. Deputies opened it with gloved hands. Cold air rose from the shaft. The stairwell descended 12 steps to a reinforced door with an electronic latch. A tech presented the same power pack to a side port. The latch released at 10:59 a.m. They entered at 11:01 a.m. Body-worn cameras recorded the first sweep. The room was concrete, roughly 30 feet long, 12 feet wide. A partial wall screened a toilet and sink. A kitchenette stood against the far wall. On the left, 3 cots were made up with flat sheets. 3 adult women stood near the center pipe, facing the door. Their hair was clean but dull. Their arms showed faint pressure marks from old restraints. They wore plain tees and drawstring pants. Avery Porter spoke first. She said her name and asked if the date was correct. She asked if they were police. Hollis identified the agency and the purpose. He stated the time and asked if anyone needed medical care. Avery said they were stable. She said 2 others had died years earlier. She named Rachel Cole and Lila Ramirez. She said another member, Autumn Porter, had been killed during an escape attempt in 2014. She spoke without description. Hollis did not ask for detail. He requested medics and secured the room. Cara Stanton and Hannah Lee gave their names and dates of birth. Their IDs had been taken in 1997. A tech documented water jugs, a microwave, a small fridge, and a locked metal cabinet. The cabinet contained bandages, over-the-counter medication, and unopened vitamins. No weapons were visible. The women said the door had stayed locked at all times. Deliveries came down the stairs according to a monthly schedule. A clipboard on the wall listed dates and initials. Several entries read Mr. Others read GL. One line at the top read VC. At 11:19 a.m., deputies moved Lawford to the driveway for separation. He was not under arrest. He was read his rights and declined to answer beyond counsel. He said the barn was a storage retrofit. He said renters used parts of the property for legitimate training. He said he had not been in the storage room in years. He denied knowing any of the names on the clipboard. Medics arrived at 11:32 a.m. Vital signs were checked and recorded. The women refused transport until statements could be given with Hollis present. He agreed to brief intake at the substation first. The crime scene team photographed the door, the keypad, and the hinge side. They lifted prints from the cabinet handle and the clipboard clip. They bagged a set of keycards from a drawer and a 6-digit code note stuck under tape. At 11:51 a.m., Hollis escorted Avery up the stairs into full light. She shielded her eyes. She scanned the yard, the cameras, and the house. She asked one question in a low voice. Was Victor Carr in custody? Hollis said no. He asked why that mattered right now. Avery said Carr chose who came down the stairs. She said he would know the room was open by noon. She said he always knew. Who had already warned him? By 12:08 p.m., July 13, 2017, the barn was sealed and posted. Crime scene tech started a second sweep. They photographed the keypad, hinge wear, and scuff marks on the stairwell. A locksmith catalogued 4 keycards and a taped 6-digit code. Hollis logged them and called the APD digital unit. He requested immediate imaging of a network recorder found in a metal locker. The label read NVR, Stall Cams, 2015. A county IT specialist cloned the drive at 12:41 p.m. The hash values were read aloud and entered on the property sheet. On the work table sat a hardbound ledger. Its entries ran from 2010 to 2017. Columns listed dates, initials, head counts, and unit prices. One line repeated, delivery, San Antonio Diner, 12:30. Initials alternated Mr. and GL. A blue sticky note on the inside cover read VC schedule next Thursday. Hollis photographed each page and bagged the book. A second folder held invoices from Red Athletics, LLC. Addresses included a training complex in Los Lunas and 2 rural properties south of San Antonio. Total monthly payments crossed $18,000 in several entries. The memo line read facility support. Medics cleared Avery Porter, Cara Stanton, and Hannah Lee for transport at 1:16 p.m. They accepted water and light food. Avery asked to call Elaine and Mark from Hollis's phone. Hollis allowed a brief call on speaker. Elaine answered on the first ring. The voice on each side was plain and steady. Names and times only. Avery said she would give a statement before medical intake. Hollis nodded and ended the call. At 1:33 p.m., deputies placed Grant Lawford in a cruiser for transport to the substation. He was not under arrest. He had counsel on the way. Hollis kept the tone narrow and procedural. He requested patrol cover on Interstate 25 from San Antonio to Las Cruces. He asked for a be on the lookout for a blue pickup with no plates and a rear window decal. He alerted the New Mexico State Police Fusion Center to watch license plate readers for associated vehicles owned by Red Athletics. Digital investigators finished a quick carve on the NVR at 2:07 p.m. Several short clips from 2016 and 2017 survived. They showed a man carrying boxes down the stairs. The man's face never turned toward the lens. The timestamp overlay was intact. A jacket logo showed Red Athletics. A second clip showed another man passing a clipboard to the camera's edge. He wore a ring on his right hand. The ring's face had a crescent shape. Hollis contacted the FBI at 2:21 p.m. He briefed the duty agent on possible interstate elements. Catering and supply records crossed counties and likely state lines. The Bureau agreed to assist with financial analysis and cell site warrants. A federal prosecutor joined the call for coordination. They discussed long-form charges for kidnapping, trafficking, and laundering, but held the line on public statements. The victims would be protected from cameras. No names would be released to press. At 3:04 p.m., a state trooper near Hatch reported a blue pickup traveling south at high speed. No plate. Rear window decal with white ring. 2 male occupants. Hollis authorized a stop based on equipment violations and reckless driving. Unit set a rolling block south of mile marker 147. The pickup cut to the shoulder and tried to bypass. A second unit pinned the lane. The truck stopped at 3:11 p.m. Both occupants kept hands visible. The driver identified himself as Victor Carr. Troopers found $14,200 in cash bundled in the center console. 2 prepaid phones sat in the cup holder. A gym bag in the back held a black hoodie with Red Athletics on the sleeve. No weapons were in the cab. The passenger gave the name Luke Jensen and a Los Lunas address. He had a keycard in his pocket with faint barn dust in the magnetic track. They were detained on state charges. Hollis requested transport to the Socorro substation for interview. At 3:26 p.m., APD served a parallel warrant at a rental house in Los Lunas linked to Mason Red. He was on site and taken into custody without incident. A desktop computer and 2 external hard drives were seized. A whiteboard listed deliveries and sessions. Several dates matched the ranch clipboard. One column read IA 25 and US 60. A bank box in the bedroom closet held contracts, shell invoices, and a stamp kit. One stamp read CCT Alumni Program. Back in Socorro, Hollis sat down with Avery at 4:02 p.m. The recorder light went on. Avery gave a direct account of the 1997 night. She described the arena, the club's second-place finish, and the post-show locker room. She stated that Victor Carr kept Rachel for a coach review. The others left to get sodas. When they returned, 2 men stood at the door. She remembered a chemical odor and a sharp sting in her arm. The next memory was a concrete ceiling and a bolted door. She provided names, places, and dates when she could. She avoided detail that would add trauma without probative value. Hollis marked each point and moved on. Hannah and Kara gave timelines that aligned within minutes. They confirmed that deliveries matched the clipboard. They said Mr. The brought most supplies. They said GL checked locks and cameras. They said VCs came monthly and set rules. They described an escape attempt in 2014 that ended with 2 deaths. They refused to describe violence and asked to focus on current evidence. Hollis agreed and took item-specific statements. At 5:11 p.m., the FBI arrived with a forensic accountant. She opened the ledger and traced money flows through 3 LLCs. The path ran from client payments at Red Athletics to cash withdrawals near Los Lunas, then to purchases logged as facility support near San Antonio. It was clean enough to pass casual review, but the dates lined up with the victim's statements and the diner invoices. The accountant flagged 9 transfers routed just before scheduled VC visits. Elaine and Mark reached the substation lobby at 5:34 p.m. An advocate met them and led them to a quiet room. Hollis stepped in and said the words they had waited 20 years to hear. He kept them plain. Avery is safe and with medics. She is giving a recorded statement. You can see her after intake. Elaine sat down and let air out slowly. Mark stood still and stared at the wall clock. In holding, Carr asked for an attorney and said he had nothing to say. The blue pickup was photographed and towed. The rear window decal was intact. It showed a crescent around 3 letters. Not CCT. 3 letters no one expected to see on that glass. What did those letters change? The decal on the blue pickup resolved under lab light on July 14, 2017, at 9:12 a.m., inside the Socorro substation. The letters read CPF within a crescent ring. Not CCT. Hollis pulled filings from the New Mexico Secretary of State. Car Performance and Fitness, LLC, formed in late 1999, listed Mason Red as manager. 2 years later, Grant Lawford appeared on a banking resolution as an authorized signer. The trio overlapped on accounts and vendor contracts. The Crescent logo was registered in 2000 and retired in 2011, then reappeared on the pickup's rear glass in 2017. Old branding had never really left the road. On July 15, 2017, a federal task force joined the case. Agents mapped money from Red Athletics and the older CPF entity into shell vendors. They traced deli invoices from the San Antonio diner to cash withdrawals in Los Lunas. The ledger from the barn showed headcounts and dates that aligned with deliveries. 9 entries landed within hours of recorded VC visits. The NAS and NVR devices produced limited but usable clips. Gloves, boxes, and a ring with a crescent face crossed lenses multiple times. No violence appeared on camera. Movement and scheduling did. Avery Porter gave a second, longer statement on July 16, 2017. She kept her focus on times, places, and faces. She refused to describe trauma that had no evidentiary value. Kara Stanton and Hannah Lee corroborated key points within minutes. Each named Victor Carr as the figure who set rules and chose who entered the room. Each named Mason Red as the supplier and paperwork handler. Each named Grant Lawford as the property controller who checked locks and cameras. They noted an attempted escape in 2014. They listed dates of medical neglect in 2012 tied to Rachel Cole's death. They marked missing clothing and gear removed from a storage bin in June 1997. Every answer stayed inside a box of facts. On July 20, 2017, a federal grand jury in Albuquerque returned indictments for kidnapping, sex trafficking by force, conspiracy, and laundering. Carr was named as lead defendant. Red and Lawford were charged as co-conspirators. The U.S. Attorney's Office filed motions to shield victim identities and restrict pretrial publicity. The court granted both. Bail was denied. The blue pickup remained impounded. The crescent decal was photographed, removed, and logged. Forensic work continued through fall 2017. Fibers from the duffel matched 1990s-era team wear, with dye ratios typical of a specific vendor. The cloth wrist wrap reading CCT contained laundry pen residue consistent with samples in the porter's storage box. The adhesive shard found near the pull-out shared polymer markers with the CPF decal film. A cast of a boot print from the ridge tracked to a brand found in Red's garage. A keycard with barn dust matched the Lawford door reader's logs. One recovered phone stored contacts under initials that lined up with ledger entries. In early 2018, Red asked for a deal. He offered contracts, emails, and the customer list for Red Athletics. He handed over a flash drive with spreadsheets that tied monthly sessions to cash pickups and CPF reimbursements. He agreed to testify to the roles of the three men. He admitted the brand shift from CCT to CPF was designed to outlast scrutiny. He claimed Carr stayed in control after the sale and used Red as a legal shield. He described Lawford's gate codes, delivery routines, and a backup room that was never built. Trial opened in June 2019 in federal court, Albuquerque. The judge barred cameras but allowed audio transcripts. The jury sat through weeks of ledgers, GPS logs, clipped videos, and controlled, narrow testimony. Avery entered, stated her name, age, and the date she disappeared. She told the jury what she saw and when she saw it. She kept to times and distances. She did not deliver emotion. The room stayed silent anyway. Cara and Hannah followed with the same discipline. The defense tried to redirect to memory gaps. The judge sustained objections when questions drifted to pain instead of proof. Prosecutors closed with a chart tying dates, initials, payments, and movements. The diner invoices, the ledger lines, the decal, and the keycard stood shoulder to shoulder. On July 12, 2019, the jury returned guilty verdicts on all major counts against Carr and Lawford. Red was convicted on laundering and conspiracy, with sentencing deferred under cooperation. In February 2020, the court imposed life on Carr without parole. Lawford received 40 years. Red received 22 under the agreement, with restitution and registration terms. Avery, Cara, and Hannah entered long-term support programs under federal protection. Elaine and Mark Porter moved their daughter to a secure residence out of state. No cameras met them. No press conference aired. The court ordered all identifying images sealed. The barn was forfeited. The door was welded shut, then removed. The property was sold at auction the next year. In the file, one question remained. Why had the duffel surfaced in 2017 after 2 quiet decades? Hollis thought someone tried to move evidence when rumors of a cold case review spread. Red said Carr ordered old items buried deeper. Lawford claimed he never saw the duffel until police arrived. The ledger's last VC entry sat for weeks before the hiker's call. It was the only square that did not close.